it's probably not really a moonshot if it sounds too reasonable.
That's Astro Teller, and he runs Google's X, the Moonshot Factory, which has birthed all sorts of unreasonable ideas like Waymo self-driving cars, advanced AI, which became Google Brain, high-flying balloons that beam broadband down to Earth, and more. Astro and I had a fascinating chat at South by Southwest about why they call it a factory and how they organize for innovation.
We greenlight everything. The business we're in is redlighting.
Astro has a fun title. He is the captain of Moonshots, and he's run what used to be called Google X for 15 years. One of his favorite analogies is that if you want to teach a monkey to recite Shakespeare while standing on top of a pedestal,
all of your effort should be on, can I train the monkey? Get to the pedestal later. Let's focus on what is the monkey here. Like, we literally talk in those terms. What's the monkey for your thing, for your hard project? Whether it's nuclear fusion or teleportation.
I'm Dan Blumberg, and I've just teleported back from Austin, Texas to bring you this special episode of Crafted, where Astro and I discuss what needs to go right for a moonshot to take flight. Plus, Astro will tell us a bit of where X is investing today, including how biology and engineering are coming together thanks to advances in what we can prototype.
Biology is shockingly good at making stuff. If there was a box where you could say, if I make these changes, what will happen? It would radically change your ability to innovate in that space.
And now off to Google's Austin office where Astro and I met. He was at South by Southwest to launch the Moonshot podcast.
Well, Astro, thank you so much. Really fun to have you on Crafted. How do you greenlight a moonshot? What are the things you look for to say, okay, we're gonna really invest in this? Not just a problem space, but a specific solution.
I think it's a very natural question, but it works the other way around. You said really invest in. The answer is we greenlight everything. The business we're in is redlighting stuff. So we greenlight everything that has the form of a moonshot story hypothesis. Huge problem with the world, radical proposed solution for fixing that huge problem, and some kind of breakthrough technology that gives us a way to at least test the hypothesis. Once you have those things, high five, cool that you thought of one. I bet you're wrong. Statistically, you have like a 99% chance of being wrong. How little money would it take? How fast could you get the first piece of evidence about whether you're on the right track or not? So greenlighting everything is often tens of thousands of dollars, not tens of millions of dollars. And I don't want you to spend years trying to make this work. I want you to spend weeks trying to make this not work. As soon as you can verify, not this will definitely never work, but just, oh yeah, this is going to be a lot harder and more complicated than I thought, and the thing I thought might be the special sauce here, maybe not. Cool, let's throw it away, just have another idea. So that's actually the process, is about what we red light much more than what we green light.
Yeah, so let me flip the question then. How do you red light things? What is it that you look for to say, not this, let's move on to, I mean, I know you have a backlog of tons of ideas, so there's pressure to red light things regularly.
So some of it is kill criteria. Let's say in the early days, you're working on the teleporter, and you think it's gonna work super well, and you're telling me big stories about how well it's gonna work, and I'd say, great. Intellectual honesty is hard. Can we agree if a year from now, you haven't made at least this much progress, and we kind of agree on something? That would be a bad sign. Either it's a sign that you've got the wrong team, or that this problem is, at least for right now, with the current technology, unsolvable, and you're feeling very bullish about it right now. So you say, oh yeah, totally, we'll do at least that. We'll learn at least that much stuff. We'll be at least this far along. We'll have de-risked at least 2 of the following 20 things. And great, let's just write that down. Then we get a year later, and we come back to the kill criteria, and we say, how are you doing against those? I mean, invariably you've missed. Almost every team misses on them. But at least it opens up the conversation for, the default is we should turn this off. Tell me a story that's not you really want to keep doing this. Tell me a story about why. What have you learned that would justify us continuing, given that you've just missed against these kill criteria? So that's not the only way of doing it, but that's an example. habit that we use at X.
Yeah, tell me more about that conversation that sounds like you're having before you let someone run with an idea. You set up these kill criteria in advance. I'm interested in, like, what does that look like? What do you write down? And if the space is very unknown, how easily can you even write down that criteria? How do you get creative there?
I mean, in the early days, it's often very hard to know all of the kill criteria or to write them down super well, but there's certain areas, let's say if you were doing direct air capture, if you're trying to grab CO2 from the air, can we agree, however you do it, you might not know how to do it, but can we at least pre-agree it's not going to change the world if the cheapest you ever get it is $300 a ton? People already know how, or at least on a glide path to get to $300 a ton. You'd probably have to get under $100 a ton to really change the world. So then if you and I can agree about that, even if you don't have the technology yet, at least we have some like shared frame about what would count as changing the world. And now we're going to come back to the techno-economics of your idea. So in the early days, you're like, I don't know how much this is going to cost. It looks like this might be a really interesting thing, whatever your proposed way to solve it is. And then over time we would say, hey, okay, let's like try to project forward. If you were doing this at scale, what would this really cost? Yeah. And then, so at first, maybe the kill criteria is about the cost per ton to grab it. And then later we'll get into the exact numbers.
Yeah. Earlier today you spoke about the need for audacity and humility when it comes to a moonshot. I'd love if you could share more about those two necessary ingredients.
There's something a little bit unhinged, or if it can feel like it and it can sound like it in that very first moment where you say, what if? Mm-hmm. If it doesn't sound like that, it's probably not really a moonshot if it sounds too reasonable. So you have to be willing to say things that don't sound at all reasonable in the very early days. That's the audacity part. But by definition, if you're saying something which sounds implausible, like we're all decently good at pattern matching, we as a group of us, if we're like, I doubt that, on average, we're right? That means you have a, probably sub 5% chance of being right. So what are you gonna do in the first week, the first month, the first year after you start? If you head in to this thing, which is a 5% chance of success, I'm gonna make it work, I'm gonna make it work, I'm gonna make it work. Yeah. A, you're emotionally setting yourself up for being miserable. And B, you're actually not gonna spend your time right. So in the podcast this morning, I was describing the monkey and the pedestal. Mm-hmm. If you have a project to train a monkey to stand on the top of a 10-foot pedestal and recite Shakespeare, building the pedestal first is a total waste of your time. It can feel like you're half done, but if you are honest with yourself that you're unlikely to train the monkey, all of your effort should be on, can I train the monkey? You can always build the pedestal later. If you go into any project thinking, I'm gonna make it work, I'm gonna make it work, the temptation is huge to build the pedestal first. Because you get to feel good that you've made progress, and you're in denial about the fact that it's probably not going to work. So you're unconsciously avoiding the really hard question, can I train the monkey? So at X, everything is about, get to the pedestal later. Let's focus on what is the monkey here, like we literally talk in those terms. What's the monkey for your thing, for your hard project? Whether it's nuclear fusion or teleportation, or we're gonna try to make some magic box that's like solves the education problem for the world. Tell me what's so good about it. Yeah. Tell me how it's gonna help. Tell me why you think it's possible. What's the first experiment you're gonna run? And help me understand how that experiment is gonna get us evidence that shows us either we're a little bit more on the right track than we thought, or we're a little bit less on the right track than we thought. And either of those is an equally good answer. And here's the hardest part. I'm then gonna hold you to intellectual honesty about the results of the experiment. I cannot let you go on unlikely journeys unless you've pre-committed to me to practice that intellectual honesty once we have the results of each of these experiments.
Yeah, and do you have that meeting? I'm interested in more in the team. We're talking about first this one individual who has humility and audacity, but I'm curious the team structure, both what you look for, how you structure a team that is more likely to succeed, even though the point is most of them are not going to succeed. Do you have this conversation that we're talking about with the whole team at the outset, not just the team leader?
I mean, I have this conversation with Xers at all hands. I have this conversation with the team leads and with the whole teams. But more importantly, each of us has it with each other. Culture is not something the CEO says at the company meetings. That's not culture. Culture is what you say to each other when the CEO is not in the room. So if we want this to be the norm, then when I'm not there, you, the team members, need to be saying it to each other. And how you get it in the water so that everyone is saying it to each other and believes that that's a rational way of behaving, at least locally at the Moonshot Factory, that's what all the culture engineering that's gone into the Moonshot Factory is for, is to normalize that kind of conversation. And by the way, the podcast, this is part of what we're trying to unpack is, what does it feel like to be going through this as an individual or as part of a team? How did the team support each other and wrestle with particularly hard problems? Should we stop? Should we pivot? How did we experience the sort of nurturing or lack thereof from X as we felt it?
And on the question of how you structure a team that is more likely to succeed, earlier today you were on stage with an artist. There's people who come from disciplines that might not ordinarily be included in a team like this. I'm curious what you look for in terms of how you balance personalities or backgrounds or what you found over the 15 years that have led to more successful outcomes.
I think more than anything else, the thing that matters, the word sadly is out of vogue at the moment, but it's diversity. And I don't just mean that in gender or ethnic sense. I mean that in the broad sense of, if everyone on the team thinks the same, you're not going to have a lot of creative disagreements. You're not going to take each other to uncomfortable places. Yeah. The more different people are on the team in terms of their skills, their backgrounds, their experiences, the more they're going to pull each other out of their comfort zones, and the more somebody will actually be like, hey, I actually know about this. Ooh, I've had an experience that's relevant to this. So having that disparateness, and whether it's because you have a chocolatier on the team or a puppeteer or someone who lived under the ocean for a month, like, you'd be surprised. It matters less which of those you pick, because you often don't know where you're going in the early days, than that you have the sort of dimensionality of the team along at least some unexpected dimensions.
Yeah. Can you give an example of how a diverse team like that led to something that was, unexpected?
I guess they knew it was going to matter in a general sense. Loon, the stratospheric balloon project, hired someone who had been a seamstress. And on the surface, it's like, why would you do that? But in fact, we were trying to make something that was cheaper per square meter than a garbage bag, the size of a house, that had to withstand enormous pressures between the day-night cycle. There's 150 degrees Celsius range in how hot or cold it would be. And how to put this together was like half clothing making and half architecture. It was a very hard, weird problem that was about the physics of it, but the physics was a lot of it was fabric or pseudo fabric, and in fact the materials themselves. Should you use one kind of plastic, another kind of plastic, layers of them? How are you going to stitch these things together or glue them together or other things? So that particular person and many others, the fact that she had a background in fabric and how to work with fabric was really important to our manufacturing of these balloons.
Tell me why you call it the Moonshot Factory. I'm curious about that metaphor of the factory.
So you were talking about audacity and humility. I was also talking about this ends of the spectrum from like almost pure chaos where you just throw money at people and like see what they do, to total efficiency where you're arbitrarily uptight and you have maybe moonshots over here but no efficiency. You have lots of efficiency over here but no moonshots. And we're trying to do something in the middle. We're trying to get most of the magic and creativity and bravery that we can from this end of the spectrum, moonshots, but also get as much of the rigor and organization and focusing of that energy in a particular set of directions as we can, factory. So the word Moonshot Factory is supposed to remind us about audacity and humility. It's supposed to remind us we're trying to do something which is inherently coloring outside the lines, but we don't just want scribbles. The factory part is supposed to remind us we're systematizing the process of innovation. And what we're trying to maximize is not necessarily any one thing through the factory. It's the factory itself. The factoryness of it is actually our long-term goal, but the thing the factory produces is Moonshots.
I want to ask you a hypothetical question. So I've worked as a product manager, and I've been a part of a variety of different new product groups at the New York Times, at City Ventures, where I was. And if I just hired you today as the chief innovation officer of some big legacy company, banking, utilities, media, pick any domain that you like, but like 200-year-old company, and I want more 10x projects, I don't want as many 10% improvements.
So let's play this game.
All right.
You're the CEO, you're asking to hire me to run a Moonshot Factory for you. The first thing is good news, it can be done. Second piece of good news, if you give me less money, you'll get fewer moonshots. And obviously this can't scale down to $1 a year, right? But it's not as expensive as you think. This is doable for a company like yours. If you're willing to set aside less than 1% of your money, I can get you a Moonshot Factory. So, now that's the good news. Here's the bad news. I'm gonna take your money, we're gonna take your money, and we're gonna try a lot of things, and we're mostly gonna be wrong. And you're gonna look at us being wrong, and you're gonna lose your mind.
Yeah, get a little impatient.
Do you have the patience to make it a decade? The handwriting will start to be on the wall 7, 8 years in. By 10 years, it'll be very clear, I think. But you have to have a commitment now that you're gonna make it that long. And I need it from you, the CEO, and from the board, because you might not even be here by then. Right. And I need to hear you say several times, probably in writing, you really understand what I just said. Because the stomach for that, because here's what I'm not gonna do. When you come tell me about the pressures you have and that you want me to start playing a shorter game because you feel like that, I'm gonna say, no thank you. And if you need me to step down, if you're done with a Moonshot Factory, respect, I'm happy to hand you my badge and leave. But I'm not gonna sub-optimize this thing, because that's actually part of what you're paying me for if you hire me to do this, right, is to not sub-optimize. So you have to really be signed up for this journey. I promise you, 10, 15 years in, the value that's produced by this process will be significantly higher than the money that you've spent. You're going to be glad. It's just getting through that first 10 years is gonna be really hard. So are you up for that?
Yeah, yes, we're gonna commit the money. I believe in that. We've got a long time horizon. I'm not gonna bug you with quarterly results.
Fantastic.
Perfect. So what do we do first?
Well, actually, the first thing is, I would hope, but let's do a sanity check. Is there anything that's off the table? I need to know if there are particular areas that you're not interested in. Oh, and I should warn you, I'm only interested in fishing at the intersection of purpose and profit. If you want this to be a sort of marketing stunt, I'm not interested. If you want this to be sort of a piece of philanthropy, I'm not interested. If you want this to make as much money as possible and you don't care what it does for the world, I'm also not interested. So I'm taking that as an assumption. It's part of what's really important, at least to us, about moonshot taking.
Yeah.
If you're up for that, and there's no particular area that we can't explore that's sort of like a third rail for you, we're just gonna start exploring. And we need to work out, what happens? Let's say we get fusion working. Do you wanna keep the fusion here? Should we land it outside of your company as an independent company where we still own a substantial part of it, but it can then sort of go off on its own? So we're gonna have to work on that sort of stuff over time, even though it'll be a while before we have the teleporter or nuclear fusion working well.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna start exploring.
Yeah. And how do you advise companies that ask you, how can we have more innovation at our company? Because I've seen a tension before of there's the innovation lab, and it's really cool. They've got all the fun toys and different time horizons, things like that. And then there's folks who are working in, say, the core product group. And I think I've seen a tension where it's like everyone should be innovating, or no, we should have a lab. And I think the pendulum swings back and forth. But I'm curious how you assess that question of where innovation belongs.
I mean, at any company of any size, no one should be forbidden from innovating. Innovating with a lowercase I, like trying to do things better, even in somewhat surprising ways, that's everybody's job to some extent, I hope. And it is part of the physics of innovation and of corporations that when you try to do particularly different things from whatever the sort of main part of the company is doing, the main part of the company resists. Not on purpose, but just de facto. That's how any company operates. This is the innovator's dilemma.
Yeah.
And so you have to culturally and operationally separate the place that's doing the capital I innovation, the particularly over the horizon innovation, from the rest of the business to create some protection from that innovator's dilemma. I don't think there's a way around that. So I don't know if that's a partial answer to that question, but I hope that there's little I innovation going on everywhere and leaving some space for that capital I innovation, even if it's only like, 1, 2, 3% of the company's money, I think is pretty important. And if you go to a lot of these places that look like they're having fun, and you probably have done this, and you ask them, is your company actually really supporting you doing this other than just sort of going in a circle and looking cool? Yeah. They'll mostly say no.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens that I've seen is you get to a certain point and then it faces organ rejection. Like It comes to the core product group or the core technology team, and this is nice, that's cool. It's not going to make revenue now. I have a roadmap. I don't quite know what to do with this.
That's part of the innovator's dilemma. Yeah. So making sure part of the design of any Moonshot Factory is what's the conveyor belt that's going to get you all the way from a crazy idea to an enduring business. And you have to make sure that at no point in that process is there a handoff to someone who's going to have a not invented here attitude about it.
The Moonshot Factory is 15 years old now, and I know the things that it's best known for, like self-driving cars and advances in AI, have been in works for many years. I'm curious where you're planting seeds, placing bets, today that we might hear about in 15 years from now. I'm curious what areas are really exciting to you.
Well, I made one prediction. It's early days, so I don't know exactly how it will play out, but this movement from biology as a science to biology as an engineering discipline, I believe that we're in the middle of that transition now. And so this isn't a single project, but we've seen this playing out in some of the projects that we're exploring in the earlier days of. So that's not a finished moonshot, but that is a space in which I suspect we will take multiple moonshots over time. Yeah. So that's an example. There are some that are, let's call it, halfway between just started and Waymo. Tapestry, which is our moonshot for the electric grid, is something that we've announced recently that is right place, right time. And we're feeling really excited and proud of having built this like underlying digital infrastructure that allows for grid operators to do a much better job of managing what they have, planning for the future, and for optimizing their grids in real time.
Yeah, no, and I know with the new demand, we already have enough demand, but with AI creating even more demand, we want to have more nuclear energy or solar or wind, and I understand the problem, like the grid is not ready to accept new supply.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's an example of something that's in sort of like the middle maturity stage, let's call it.
Got it. And on the biotech, there's a ton of excitement around how AI meets biology. And can you explain a little more specifically what areas there, what it might unlock?
A central piece of the thesis is that biology is shockingly good at making stuff. And right now, humanity makes, depending on exactly how you measure it, sort of like $2 to $10 trillion a year of stuff. Not manufactured stuff, like stuff that ends up like in a barrel or a box. Everything from like the threads that go into garments to the sort of oil that goes into cars, like stuff. And you could make most of that, trillions of dollars a year, faster, cheaper, with a lower footprint for society if you made it using these self-replicating, carbon negative factories, which biology has provided for us. You would start with things like bacteria. Humanity already has the ability to reprogram them, to change either the code that decides how they operate, their DNA, but also the environment in which they are. So like how much sugar you put around them, what temperature do you have them at? There's a complex mix of the sort of situation that they find themselves in. So if you wanted them to make an enzyme for laundry detergent, make a human milk sugar that helps in baby formula, almost anything you could make, you can make using one of these tiny little biologic factories. The problem is, if you're a strain engineer and your job is to program them, is to change their DNA, what happens when you change a bunch of the parts of their DNA from one thing to another thing? You don't know. Yeah. You can guess. Maybe you've done some pattern matching in your life, but it's basically just guesswork and black magic. If there was a box where you could say, what should I change it to? Or if I make these changes, what will happen to the, let's say, the E. coli or other kinds of bacteria, yeast or something like that? It would radically change your ability to innovate in that space. It would be the equivalent of moving from making user interfaces using assembly programming, you remember that? Mm-hmm. To all of a sudden HTML existed, and the explosion in user interface creativity that happened, the same thing is going to happen here.
So this is an example of you're able to prototype real world things in software.
Exactly.
I know that's unlocking things in biology and all sorts of spaces, and tell me more about how other areas where that may lead to radical innovation because these AI and these prototyping tools are mature enough. Is that
AI is speeding it up? It is not just about AI. I don't think humanity is going to discover fairly quickly. You can't just take your problems and feed it to some AI machine and the other side will just give you what you want. AI, it will turn out, is like the transistor or electricity. It will be in everything.
Yeah.
But just like in the middle of the 20th century, we have electricity. You can't just hand your problem to electricity and get everything you want on the other side. There's going to be a ton of sort of creativity and product and service building, system engineering that has to happen with intelligence being a new material that we can stick into the thing that we're designing. We can even use intelligence as a mechanism for helping us do that system engineering. But there's still a lot of work in what do you do? How do you put it all together? And whether it's the future of biology as an engineering discipline or it's something very different, I think we're going to see artificial intelligence in everything, but not the solution to everything.
Right. I want to ask you about climate tech, and I'm curious just on the time horizon question, like, do we have time to solve some of the biggest problems here?
Well, I mean, the problems that humanity faces in the climate front are very pressing, so we certainly don't have any time to waste.
Yeah.
I guess I'm an optimist, so I would like to believe we barely have the time to do it. Yeah. But I do believe that it's going to sound pessimistic, but I'll have an optimistic end. I believe as long as doing the wrong thing is cheaper or more profitable than doing the right thing, humanity as a whole will do the wrong thing, which is what we're seeing with sort of climate change. And the point at which humanity will start doing the right thing en masse is when it becomes cheaper or more profitable to do the right thing. And the only way to deliver that is technology. So I think it is absolutely critical, and it is a huge business opportunity, a money-making opportunity, as well as like mission critical for humanity, to find ways to make it so that doing the right thing, like not burning dinosaur juice, is the path forward for humanity. When that gets cheaper, A, humanity will be much better off, and B, whoever's made that technology is going to make a lot of money. This is a great example of purpose and profit having some real overlap.
Astro, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
That's Captain of Moonshots, Astro Teller. I'm Dan Blumberg, and we'll have more from South by Southwest coming up on Crafted, so be sure to subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, sign up for the Crafted newsletter at crafted.fm. And if I can help you innovate, please reach out. This show is produced by Modern Product Minds, where my team and I specialize in customer discovery, rapid prototyping, and ways to level up your product squad. Learn more at modernproductminds.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with an innovator you know. Word of mouth is how podcasts grow, so please tell a friend.
All of your effort should be on, can I train the monkey?